maybe if you tie
Okay, we're
in
gonna
that
start here.
story of mental health with who you are, okay?
Yes.
Okay, Auntie, we're gonna
So
start,
it makes
Auntie.
a more personal story
Yeah.
instead of, So if you do that, then they know more about you and why you went into that.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Hopefully I'll be
This
able
is,
to answer this question.
This is session 4. This is our FANHS 101 Zoom event, session 4. And as tradition, before we even start, I would bow our heads and ask for a moment of silence. Everybody, please mute.
She's it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess you know she's in, huh?
Okay.
Oh, something wrong with that?
I brought your cookies.
Oh, okay, good. Here, what? Try this one.
Before we begin, I would like to ask for a moment of silence and to think about those who are not able to make it here today, especially those who left the Philippines,
I can't do it
who
online.
came to America
No, you'll eat it later.
to put a roof over our heads,
It's gonna make you.
food in our stomachs, and
Oh,
to
sorry.
provide us opportunities that were denied to them. Thank you. Okay, Auntie Dorothy, I'll let you start off.
This is a very important part of the 4-day series because when I was born here as I know I'm an American. However, a lot of Americans, white Americans, never thought I was. And then when more immigration was coming in, I was so happy to meet the new immigrants from the Philippines. Many of them would greet me in Tagalog and I'd say, I'm sorry, I don't speak Tagalog. My parents are Ilocano. I understand that. And then they would say, well, then you're not Filipino. So I was conflicted for a while. So what the heck am I? If some people say I'm not American, though I was born here, and other people from my homeland, I guess you would call it, would say I wasn't because I didn't speak a language that they're speaking, then I decided that I am a Filipino American. I declare both groups. And so with this one, we wanted to, and I know I was going overboard on what I'd like you to reflect on. So what are you? Just think about it before you answer it. Are you Filipino only? American only? Filipino American? An American Filipino? Are you Filipinx? Are you Pinoy? Are you a dual citizen? And to all of these, why? How do you think you describe yourself after all the years you were here or you were born here? So that's the cutting edge question that we want at the end of this. So good luck. And thank you very much for taking part in this session.
Okay.
I guess,
Let's see.
Ryan.
I'm on?
Not yet.
Okay.
You lead, you introduce the people.
I wanted to, I've been getting a lot of back email things discussing the brain drain. For some reason, they do not understand the importance of the first generation that came here. And I'm just gonna do something real quick, okay? Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay, 1898, that's when Philippines became a colony of the United States. And the, let's see, how's that? Is that better? Hello? I guess not. Anybody there?
No, I got it, Alan. We see
Yeah,
it.
we can see it.
I can
Okay,
read it.
I'm just,
No,
I need
got it.
comments too, okay?
You need a response.
Yes, please. Anyway, colony becomes, Philippines becomes a colony in the United States. And one of the most important things that America did in the Philippines was to instill the value of an education. And so you had the Thomasites that came in, about 600 of them came in to introduce education in the Philippines, making English the major language. And this was around 1901. So when you start doing the math, and it probably took about 12 years, I'd say, to have schools built all over the Philippines, and you add 10 years to that. So you're looking about the mid 1920s or even the early 1920s as that first graduating class of the American educational system. And one of the things that they said was, in order to really make it, you need to get a college degree. And the only way to get a college degree would be at an American university. And so this is what these guys look like. Most of them were from the Ilocanos, were Ilocano from the Ilocos. And they did not need to have passports or visas. They were all American nationals. All they had to do to come to America is to pay their way over. But they were already poor. And so they still wanted to come to America to get that college degree. And so if you were a father and you were going to send a son, who would you send? Your dumbest kid? Your laziest kid? No, you probably send your most resourceful kid and one that's really willing to work, very resourceful. This is my dad. Look at that, 1928. Okay, so he came to America not to be a laborer. He came to America to get a college degree. But when he came to America, there was nobody here to greet him. He had to go find work. And that's when he became a houseboy and a menial labor. In other words, he worked in the kitchen, hotels, that kind of stuff. And it was kind of rough going to a new country like this. But he made, look at that, it's a Filipino club, 1928, and look how they're dressed. This is high school. But they were met with a lot of racism. And then just that sign doesn't say no Filipinos allowed. It says positively no Filipinos allowed. They could only live in certain neighborhoods. They could not own property, and they could not become American citizens. And on top of that, 1929, what happened? The Great Depression. All of a sudden, jobs became scarce. And a lot of the my uncles and my father, they were kind of like desperate. So like, what are you going to do? Then they had legislation, like we talked about, was the Tidings-McDuffie Act. So what that act was essentially was it'll limit the amount of Filipinos coming into America to 50. And then the Repatriation Act, well, they were hoping Filipinos would go back to the Philippines so they would pay their way, because Filipinos were looked as competition for wages and that kind of stuff. So that's why the Repatriation Act, occurred. So out of the 45,000 Filipinos in America, how many do you think left? Not too many, because they started to pool their resources together. My uncles, my father, we all started to live in like one room, 16 in one room. Probably every one of these guys here owned that car. So in other words, tremendous sharing, tremendous camaraderie. If you have a problem, it's my problem. That's the type of brotherhood or community that was in America at that time. And so World War II came. From brown monkeys, they became the fighting Filipinos. And all
I'll have a bet on my backstory.
okay, can everybody mute, please? And so there was a change there, and that's how, hopefully, I hope you understand, that's why I consider that the first brainwave. And every time I see this picture,
Alan, are you
held their
speaking?
heads high, and they're all gone. Sorry. But their legacy lives on. I vowed to them, and I vowed to my uncles and father to set the record straight. They weren't broken down men that lived in Chinatown, okay? These were the best of the best in the 1920s. But every time I see this picture, it just gets to me. So the next story is my mom and Manongs, but we're not going to talk about that story because if you think the Manongs were good, imagine the Manongs. So with that said, okay, Auntie Dorothy, you have to unmute. Unmute. I just wanted to share that with you because a lot of you probably never seen that or even heard of that type of perspective. But FANHS means a lot to me. The history means a lot to me because I vowed to get the story straight. So go ahead, Auntie.
Your stories.
Go ahead. You got the floor, Auntie.
You're muted, Auntie. You're muted.
Okay. Alan, stop.
I did.
It's time to go to the next group.
Yes, I understand. But I had to get that out, Auntie. A lot of misinformation
Yeah.
is out there.
We all do, but we're
Okay.
doing post 65. Okay.
Correct. So
Thank
with
you.
that said, we'll go on to our next group.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Alan. You got us on a very emotional start, but in a very good way. Whew, I don't know. Okay, let's try to let's try to get back on track here. So thank you, Auntie Dorothy. Thank you, Alan, for that. My name is Ryan Namata. I am the current national president of the National Association of Filipino Federation of Filipino American Associations, or we just say NaFFAA. This is a real pleasure for us to be here. It's a real honor for us to be here. We really appreciate the collaboration with FANHS. And I like to say that FANHS is actually our ate. FANHS was founded in the 80s, 1982. We were founded in 1997. So much respect to, to FANHS here and everything that they've done. I have the pleasure of moderating the next group here of NaFFAA Leaders. And what I'll do is, in the interest of time, I introduced myself yesterday in the long form. I'll do a very quick 30 seconds, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal experience with each of the panelists in the next panel, and then I will hand it off to them. So I was just so you all know, I'm Cebuano. I was born in Cebu City, and I came here around 9-10 years old. And we came here via our Lulu, who fought on the American side in World War II. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Thanks very much to Phil Vet Rep for doing that, one of our other partners in the community. I have been in human resources for the past over 20 years now, and so that's been a lot of my professional experience, but have been part of the Filipino community since I could be. I always like to say that, for someone like me who came here from the Philippines, my story is a little bit different from Filipino Americans. They're looking for their culture. I'm really trying to preserve mine. And so that's part of why I am part of NaFFAA and why many of you are part of your organizations. So let me start by talking a little bit about the different panelists that we have here coming up. I'll start with Dr. Rommel Rivera. He will give his introduction in the long form after this, but I do want to make sure that I talk a little bit about my experience with him. I've been a very fortunate audience member of Dr. Rivera's sessions about mental health, especially of Filipinos, especially of young people, with insights that go from frightening to enlightening, and I think that you will see that when he presents. Additionally, Dr. Rivera and his family are really a model for the community. It seems like every last one of his family members has given their time, talent, and treasure for our community. So I really admire him. Our other panelist is Jelly, or we say Tita Jelly Carandang here. She is one of the most memorable NaFFAA leaders for me because she is an absolute firecracker, and you guys will see that. I've seen her argue down a CPA in several board meetings fearlessly. She's also really been the voice in the back of our minds, reminding us to do the right thing in terms of the Filipino community. But don't let her fiery exterior fool you. She is at her core a nurturer. Every time I see her, she gives me food, candy, and I've also gotten a lot of beautiful barongs from her. She carries a lot of that nurturing nature in her work for the Filipino community as well. And then last but not least, of course, Lou Vargas, who is on the panel. You will find few in our community who is as dedicated and as relentless as Lou in advocating for our people. And even greater, he's always been the one to defend Filipinos who are at the margins of our population and asserting that they are just as Filipino as us and deserve the same respect. Lou is a reminder of one of our most hallowed values as Filipinos, which is the bayanihan spirit. For the entire village to thrive, everyone must help each other, no exceptions. He is literally everybody's friend, and though he may not consider me one of his best friends, I consider him mine. It's my pleasure to me to introduce Lou to get us started. I know he has some slides. Lou, can I hand it off to you?
And so it's working on myself.
Hey, Lou. Are you ready to go?
Yes, sir. Sure am. All right, go ahead and pass me over, and then I'll take control of the screen.
I think you should have it now. Go ahead.
Can someone tell me if you see my screen here? It says intergenerational conversations.
We don't see it yet.
You need to click on share. Did you share it?
Yes. All right, here we go. So as Ryan mentioned earlier, I'm going to be talking about like intergenerational conversations. However,
Is Lou frozen?
I'm actually going to narrow down my site when it comes to death and fashion. Death and fashion when it comes to intergenerational conversation, and explain to you some theories why I believe that is. Okay. Now, just some perspective. This is the perspective that I'm coming from. I am an 11-year funerarian with Dignity Memorial Parks and Funeral Homes, and that's why I can tell you that there's differences in how different generations approach death. I am also the president of the NaFFAA Washington chapter, and that's why I'm so keen on paying attention to our community, our culture. I'm also the founder of Philippine American Fashion Week, and I can definitely tell you, of course, as fashion evolves, generations evolve, there are generational differences there. So let's talk about obituaries, for instance, okay? The silent generation of first-generation immigrants from the Philippines are more likely to claim most of their significant achievement as having come to the United States. So when I help some of my clients from this generation and ask them, well, what's your biggest accomplishment that we should write in your obituary? It's always coming to the United States and being able to bring my family here. And anything that's linked to that, such as sending money back, etc., etc. Just as in obituaries as well, the baby boomers of the first generation immigrants from the Philippines are more likely to claim their most significant achievement as pertaining to their professional accomplishments. So we're now shifting from their most important achievement as having come to the United States, now as their professional accomplishments here in the United States, okay? So it's not that claim to the immigration status anymore. It's more of their professional identity. Now in fashion, okay, I dare say that the baby boomers and the Gen Xers of the first generation immigrants from the Philippines are more likely not to wear the terno or the bolero as their primary fashion statement of choice to a non-Filipino event. And of course, history informs these choices, okay? Also in fashion, millennials are among the first of millennials within the first and second generation immigrants from the Philippines are the ones who are more likely to showcase a modern version of the terno or the bolero as their primary fashion statement of choice to non-Filipino events. And when I talk about ternos and boleros, I am talking about those who present as feminine or female. In a fashion statement, that's kind of like the perspective we're looking at here. And then comes the Gen Zers, and also among the first and second generation immigrants from the Philippines, these are the folks, female or not, who are more likely to showcase pre-colonial and indigenous inspired wardrobes as their primary fashion statement of choice at Filipino events. Why is that? Okay, so in order to truly understand the immigrants' view of reality, we have to consider a perspective. We have to consider the perspective of their parents and their grandparents, and that's why you see here a symbol of a finger, the letter L, because you have to kind of like see this L pattern when you're talking about a particular generation. So let's talk about Gen Xers and the baby boomers and apply our L perspective over here. In order to understand them, you got to understand that their parents came from the silent generation and that their grandparents came from the greatest generation. Because we are an intergenerational household, these values come from 3 different generations. And so you've got to take all of that and then bring these Filipinos to the United States. And what did they move into, right? We've got the civil rights movement right around that time and all of the facets affecting that. So that's what informs some of their perspectives and their conversations. And so when you look at a graph like this, right, the immigrant perspective, I want to throw a theory called the immigrant perspective framework, which is, again, it's the intergenerational perspective. And you take them from their original environment, you put them onto their new environment. And so with that, that's how you have the immigrant L perspective framework. You're looking at the 3 generations from which they were removed from, and then bring them to their new environment. And then once you have that perspective, then I offer another perspective that is really a lot like a Rubik's Cube. You cannot compare the experience of the baby boomers who came here when they were young adults or maybe even children to the experience of the baby boomers who moved here when they were already adults. And
3
that's
minutes
why
left, Lou. 3 minutes left, Lou. Sorry.
and that's why I had to say that, like, comparing Filipino Americans to one another, not only do you have to consider which generations prepared their perspectives, you also have to consider like what they're moving into. And that's why I would say you can't just compare these two. You can't just compare generations like a Venn diagram or a graph, a timeline. It's a lot like a Rubik's Cube. Okay. And so different sects of people, depending on when they came here to the United States, have different socioeconomic political experiences in different timelines. And so that's why you really have to consider, when they came here and, of course, what generation they belong to. And that's why I propose that when you're talking about intergenerational folks, is that you look at that in the L perspective, the 2 generations before them, and then their new environment. So to summarize all of this, right, let's take the baby boomers who came here in the 70s. These are the people who would claim themselves to be Pinoy or Filipinos because what history has afforded them at that time was the fight to be identified as such, okay? And then now we have the Gen Xers who came here in the 1990s who are now benefiting from the fight of their ancestors. So they now have the privilege of claiming that dash that they're Filipino Americans. And not that all other generations, some people in other generations haven't claimed such an identity, but I'm just saying at large, this is the perspective that we're looking at. Now, the Gen Xers of the early 2000s, these are the ones who are also claiming themselves to be Filipino Americans. Now, the millennials who are starting to decolonize a little bit more from the binary, these are the people who would start to call themselves, no, I'm a Filipino American because I'm Filipino and that's important to me. And then we've got the Gen Zers who take it even a step further by just removing gender from the binary, because the binary was introduced to us colonial times. These are people who would claim to be Filipinx Americans. And so in order to truly understand the immigrant's view of the reality, you've got to look at it like a Rubik's Cube. And so I hope that this kind of gives you an idea. And thank you very much. Once again, my name is Lou, and I wanted to propose a theory today for you to understand why in fashion, different generations make different choices, and why in obituaries, different generations seem to have different priorities.
Thank you, Lou. You got a couple of questions. Do we have time for questions? Auntie Dorothy or Romeo or Alan?
I would say just go ahead and click on my bio on the program. I'll also send a link to my bio here in the group chat so that you can reach me directly to save time.
Okay.
All right, everyone?
Yep. Thanks, Lou. Great
Wonderful.
job. And if you want, you can answer some of the questions in the chat.
Okay,
Great.
I shall do that.
So let me move us along to Tita Jelly. Are you with us? Tita Jelly? Tita Jelly, you're on mute. If you're tired, there you go. Hi, Tita. Tita Jelly, you're on mute again.
Okay. Here.
Okay, I got you spotlight. You're on mute though. Can you unmute yourself?
It's not working.
There we go. You're good. You're good.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'll introduce myself short. I'm currently the treasurer of NaFFAA Midwest. I'm the past national treasurer, and I'm also the current president of FANHS Midwest since 2016. I guess my bio shows everything, so I'll start with my presentation. It's okay to read it, right?
Yep, go for it.
Okay. Our Filipino identity is influenced by several factors: place of birth, where we were raised, family values, religion, education, and experiences. Some Filipinos in the Philippines identify themselves with the three main islands or regions. I grew up following the norm as exemplified by those around me. I don't question my parents' decisions. Being aggressive is not acceptable. We follow curfews as set. Respect for elders are expected. Over there, I can only identify myself as a Filipino. Okay. I have always dreamed of being a doctor and come to America. Being young, for me, is the ultimate sign of success. But I did not become a doctor, so I decided to make my second dream come true, at least. Everything changed when I migrated here in the United States in 1972, specifically landing in Chicago. As the first in the family to migrate, raised in a sheltered environment, coming here is a culture shock. With the country as a melting pot of immigrants, I learned to assimilate fast. Earlier on, I had a bad experience with some of our own fellow men. This forced me to be more assertive and took the bad experiences as challenges. I was lucky to find a full-time and part-time job quick. I work with people from different parts of the world. Okay. We proudly shared our respective history and cultures. The knowledge we learned from each other gained us mutual respect. After my retirement, I became involved in community service by joining various organizations. I did not limit myself to Filipino associations. Other Asians, Europeans, and Americans welcomed me into their group. I also had to adjust when dealing with nieces, nephews, and grandchildren who were born here. Of course, they grew up in a different culture. I consider myself a Filipino American after being here for 53 years. As a Filipino American, I serve my adopted country together with my mother country. I am a law-abiding citizen exercising my civic duties here. I encourage our youth to volunteer by being a role model to them. For my mother country, I organize a biennial humanitarian mission offering free dental, medical, and optical services and feed the poor children in selected areas in the Philippines. This is my way of giving back to the country of my birth. For my services through community involvement, I was awarded the Philippine Presidential Banaag Award in 2008 and the University of Santo Tomas College of Commerce Most Outstanding Alumni in 2013, as well as recognition from organizations here in America. Sharing one's blessing is the legacy that I'd like others to practice. I follow the Filipino saying that ang hindi lumingon sa pinanggalingan, hindi makararating sa patutunguhan. That's it. That's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tita. You're the first one to stay within the budgeted time, so really appreciate it. Well, we probably have room for one question if I don't see any in the chat right now. So, okay, that's great.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so great. So, Dr. Rivera, are you ready to go?
Yes.
I am pulling up your slides now.
Oh,
so
I'm
stand
gonna
by.
talk about. I'm gonna tell my story first,
Yes, go
Ryan,
for it.
and then okay.
Go
So,
for
good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for FANHS and NaFFAA for this opportunity to talk about our history. So my own history. I was born and raised in San Fernando, La Union, Philippines. I am a GI, genuine Ilocano, like Auntie Dorothy. When I was 5 years old, my mother's words echoed with determination. She said, "You will be a doctor and you will go to America like your Auntie Tentay, like my Auntie Vicenta." She told my two sisters, "You will be nurses and you will go to America like your Auntie Tentay." So her vision sets us on a path that would span continents and shape destinies. Being accepted to the University of the Philippines and offered a government scholarship there at the university, I was exposed to Western thoughts and ideas, and at the same time to progressive ideologies, witnessed firsthand the challenges faced by the Filipino masses due to corruption and foreign interference. Despite the tumultuous student protest at the time and campus unrest, I remained steadfast in following my mother's guidance, ultimately pursuing a career in medicine. After graduating from medical school, I started working as a surgery resident at a local provincial hospital in La Union. Eventually, that's where I met my wife, Ida, who is a pediatrician. Her American citizenship, through her dad, who was in the US Navy, opened the doors for us to start anew, first in Oregon, then in Florida, and eventually settling in Pennsylvania. I was naturalized citizen through her, became a US citizen, and now I'm a dual citizen. Our early days in America were characterized by resilience and hard work as we navigated odd jobs, raised a family, and triumphed over rigorous examinations, medical examinations that validated my qualifications for advanced medical training, that is internship, residency training, and fellowship. Transitioning from surgery to psychiatry allowed me to have a better work-life balance and have a keen appreciation of the mind, body, and spirit of a patient. Psychiatry opened doors for me to address mental health challenges within the Filipino community, Filipino-American community, and American communities. Rooted in gratitude for opportunities both in my homeland and adopted country, I found purpose in organizing medical missions, free medical clinics, as well as participating in seminars and conferences like this, a testament to giving back to what have been graciously given to me. Today, my passion lies in destigmatizing mental health issues and nurturing future generations of Filipino American medical students and professionals through mentorship programs. As I strive for positive change and bridge gaps within our communities, I am reminded that each step taken is not just for myself, but for those whose paths intertwine with mine, a journey determined by determination, compassion, and unwavering dedication. That's my story. And now my presentation, Ryan, please. So it will go through this very quickly. Can you make it bigger? Let's see. I have my. So as I said, my passion is this dismantling mental health stigma within the Filipino American community, empowering us as a community. Next slide. We're gonna go quickly. Breaking the stigma. This is an opportunity to break the stigma of mental health. Seminars like this, wherein mental health is included in the seminar series. There's a mental health crisis in the United States right now. Next slide. You can see here, these are the key findings in 2024. 23%, we're going to go through this quickly. 23% of adults experienced a mental health illness in the past year, equivalent to nearly 60 million Americans. 5% of adults and 30% of youth reported experiencing serious thoughts of suicide. 1 in 5 youth had at least one major depressive episode in the past year. Over one half, nearly 1 million youth, did not receive treatment. Or of those who received treatment, only 65 of them said the treatment helped. 18% of adults in the United States had a substance use disorder. 77% of them did not receive treatment. Okay, we can go next slide. This slide shows us that within the different age groups, it is the 18 to 25, this group here on the top, has a significant increased rates of depression or psychological distress, depression, anxiety, suicide rates between 2013 and 2017. As you can see, this is around 13%. Next slide. There's an unprecedented mental health crisis in the nation's young people, as I mentioned a while ago. Next slide. As you can see here, this is from 2019. It was depressive symptoms in the United States. Again, this is 8th grade, 10th grade to 12th graders. 49, nearly almost one half, have depressive symptoms of the young. Share of the young teens say they can do anything, they don't enjoy life, and there are implications here that it's related to social media. Next slide. Next slide, Ryan, please. Just to summarize, I'm sorry, back. There was a study by the Surgeon General of the United States saying that social media is the cause of the increase in depressive symptoms, anxiety symptoms in younger generation. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, just to remind everybody, the National Suicide Hotline is 988-911. I want to stay a little bit on this area here. Filipino Americans present high rates of depression and suicide. Next slide. Okay, so the summary of different studies on Filipino mental health. Mental illness is highly stigmatized in the Filipino American community. Hiya or shame comes from people with mental illness. Filipino Americans present to mental health counseling settings with high rates of depression, suicide, HIV, unintended pregnancy, eating disorders, drug use. This is taken from Nadal, Plust, and David. Intergenerational cultural conflicts and experiences on racial discrimination were identified significant contributions to depression and suicidal ideation. This is by Choi et al. Insecurities in sharing feelings and maybe not being able to fully elaborate their symptoms, least likely to seek professional mental health services, or drop out of treatment. I have my own group of patients that were Filipinos and drop out of treatment, typically seek mental health treatment when symptoms are already severe. They're suicidal or can't function. Somatization is a common manifestation of psychological or mental illness, like having a headache, stomach ache, etc., etc. Having difficulty seeking help, maybe due to hiya, bahala na. Easier to convey mental health issues to a priest or pastor. Next slide. Oh, all done? Okay. All right. All right. So that's it. If you have questions, please do later on or now or again, thank you for the opportunity to share.
Ryan, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much, Dr. Rivera. I'm sorry we had to cut for time there, but
Don't worry,
I have your slides. Yeah, and I
Mhm.
have. I'm happy to email the slides to anyone that that has questions for Dr. Rivera, including his email, so you can ask him questions there. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Thank you all. So thank you to the panelists that we have, Lou, Tita Jelly, and Dr. Rivera. Really appreciate everyone's time there. I am going to move on to the next portion here, and that will be led by Romeo, who is on. It's the next panel, older post-65ers, also on identity. So Romeo, may I hand this off to you?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ryan, and thank you for the panelists who spoke earlier. I have about 20 minutes to open up a discussion amongst our group in regards to our session 4 topic. In regards to what are you? How do you identify? Filipino, Filipino American, American, Filipinx, Pinoy, Pinay. There's a couple folks who are joining us as co-panelists today. Vicky Greco from FANHS Hampton Roads, Therese Miu from Rising Filipinas from New York and California. And also I believe Myrna is jumping on to the call in a moment. I'm going to put the prompts into the chat so everyone can see. I would like to invite Vicky Greco to please share a quick talk story for yourself in terms of how do you identify?
Hi, everyone. I'm Vicky Manuga Greco, and I do identify as a Filipino, if I had to choose one word. But Filipino, and that was the word I used when I was younger, because my parents are Filipino. I thought I was Filipino, but I didn't speak their Bicol dialect. I didn't speak Tagalog or understand it. We only spoke English because my parents really wanted us to succeed in school. So I thought about it, and I really think I definitely believe that I am Filipino American because I was born here. I'm the first American in my family, born in Pensacola, lumped with a twin brother. But I was named after my mother, my mother's mother, Victoria, and Lourdes after my mother. But my parents thought Americans ran around with nicknames, and they shortened it to Vicky Lou, which I think was fitting because I sound like a Southern belle, and I live in Virginia.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And in a moment, I'll be asking other folks to share how they identify as well. Can I invite Therese Miu to please share a few words? Welcome, Therese.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much, Romeo, for inviting me on this. Thank you. I'm actually going to say I'm Filipino American. I'm born and raised in Philippines, in the Visaya region of Leyte. I do speak Waray and I understand this Cebuano really well. But when I came here, I was 11, so I've already had like the awareness and the history. And when I came here, I didn't know about the pre-colonial, the Philippines, the pabaylan and all that stuff. So, but I do remember I lived in a village, and behind our villages was all this medicine women. So when you're sick or you have a fever or something, we don't go to the doctor or the hospital or get shots or anything. I remember vividly when I was 2 to 3 years old, we would literally walk behind and go see a medicine woman, and just like they would put hilot, it was a hilot, and so being able to identify that as an early on my upbringing really informs my identity now, in terms of like I really do want to preserve my culture, and this is something that I'm passionate about in terms of the next generation. I do have 3 children, and so I'm very I always explore ways in which they can identify more with the Filipino culture, but they are growing up to be Chinese and also Filipino. But thank you, Romeo, for having me here. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Therese. I appreciate you sharing. Do we have Myrna here? Myrna Victoriano, if you'd like to share and join. In the meantime, as you log in, I wanted to let folks know that inside the chat, I put our prompts, and I encourage folks to just popcorn and share. How do you identify? Speaking from your experience, let's listen to other folks with curiosity. What we're hearing is that no one term defines us all. And related to Lou's presentation as well, too, some of it is impacted by generations, some of it's impacted by gender and immigration status as well. And also to be respectful and concise for the sake of time, we have about 15 more minutes. So if anyone wants to share and raise your hand, which term feels most authentic to you and why? Anyone want to share? Seeing if there's a hand here. Feel free to popcorn and unmute yourself.
I'll gladly share, Romeo.
Awesome, Cassie. Welcome, Cassie, one of our trustees.
Hi, I'm one of the trustees for the Nationals. I'm also the current Filipino Town Seattle president, which has been very new. So it's definitely still bringing into that identity. But I think with this topic, especially on Filipino, Filipina, I feel like when people ask me what I am, it's one of those, well, do you even know where the Philippines are? Or if it's another Filipino asking me, I go, okay, are you going to correct if it's Filipino, Filipina? Is it Pinoy? I definitely go more with Filipino, but I love all forms. I really love like Pinoy and Pinay. I feel like when I go, are you Pinoy? I see like the light pop up a little bit more. And sometimes when I say, oh, I'm half Filipino, but I'm originally from Montana, it brings in this level of half, even though my full identity is the Filipino Montana experience. So I love all of these topics and in that, because it makes me also question, why do I feel more comfortable sometimes with Pinoy when I always often feel like I have to clarify half Filipino? So I never go with anything specific. It goes with whatever makes sense of the day, but I love the discussion of this. So thank you all for sharing all of your identities too.
Thank you, Cassie. And you bring another very important intersecting identity for folks that are multi-ethnic Filipinos here. Just want to make sure that we also hold space for you. One of the beautiful things we're learning here about Washington is that there's a significant indie Filipino community. So it's fascinating to hear their stories. Cindy Ting, I see your comment on the chat. You identify as Filipino American, born in California, but you did live in Philippines for a couple of years. Do you want to share a bit more, Cindy?
Sure. So I was born in the mid 70s, so definitely Gen X, and really not feeling like I really belonged anywhere. You know, it's that space between Filipina and American, because I had, you know, Cynthia Melissa was my first name and last name, but then, or my middle name, and then my last name's Abundabar is my maiden name. And people would be like, what? And they, you know, very American sounding names, but then the Filipino. And then when I went to the Philippines and lived there, I didn't fit there either, because at first I didn't know how to speak Tagalog. And You know, I could understand it. So I knew when they were talking crap about me, but, you know, I was able to figure it out from there. But now, you know, as I'm older, I, you know, truly embrace being Filipino American and bringing both of those worlds together. My kids are Filipinos, Chinese Filipino Americans as well. So, you know, we embrace all of this.
Thank you so much for sharing, Cindy. Does anyone else like to popcorn and chime in? How do you identify? Yes, Joe?
Hi, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to weigh in on this. I was born in the 60s, so I'm definitely a boomer, but I grew up during a time where there was an active ethnic identity movement going on. Chicanos were defining their space and their identity. Blacks were defining their space and their identity. Asian Americans, we were defining our space and identity. And so as I came to a point where I was starting to assert my own identity, it was in the context of connecting myself with these other movements, these other social movements. And so I defined myself as a Pinoy. I defined myself as a Filipino American with a P, because at that time we were in the crowd that was recognizing that we needed to assert our own ethnic identity. And as most of you all know, there's no indigenous F sound in the Philippines. And so we were Pinoys, Filipinos, Filipino Americans. And our neighbors were Black Power, Brown Power. That was our context.
I love that, Joe, and I love that you connected it to the larger solidarity movements of other communities of color. Thank you for sharing that. All right, I see several hands, which I really appreciate the full conversation. I'm going to turn it over to Alan B.
Yes. Can you hear me? It depends on who I talk to. If it's the press, the TV station, or something like that, I tell them I'm second generation Filipino American. If I talk to students, I tell them I'm Pinoy, because then you have to understand the context as far as where that term came from, which is given to those that came, Filipinos that came in the 1920s and 1930s. They made the first time to make the distinction between being Filipino and being Pinoy. Pinoy means you're a person of Filipino ancestry that lives in the United States. Now, when I talk to Filipinos, I tell them I'm Ilocano. That's it.
I love that, Alan. I really appreciate that. My dad would agree with you. He would identify very strongly as Batangueño. So thank you. All right. I see Darva's hand up, please. Darva?
Sorry. Yeah, so I have to admit, I have struggled my whole life with this. So I'm a third generation Filipino. I say now, I've always said Filipino American because my parents were both born in Hawaii. And although they spoke Visayan, they only spoke to their parents and they never taught us. So we only spoke English. And so as I was growing up, because I lived in Hawaii, and Edwina can vouch for me, I mean, nobody ever asked you in Hawaii, what are you? It was just never on my radar. I didn't really struggle with that until I left the United States because my father was in the Army. And then I was age 13. So that's when I was like, well, what the heck am I? So I say I'm Filipino American, Filipino, Chinese, Spanish descent. And then forget about my kids and my grandkids now because of the multi-ethnic culture. So the story is I'm still Filipino American. I'll be interested to ask them, what do they say now, and ask my kids and my grandkids, because I did, touch on this in the article that I submitted to FANHS. But thank you.
Fantastic, Darva. Thank you. I appreciate that. Part of our identity is also linked up with our geographical location. In Hawaii, they ask it a certain way because they want to map, are we related? Are we all from Makiki, or are we all from Manoa? So part of it is they're trying to trace lineage. So that question also, folks, if you can reflect, it's in the spirit of how people ask you, what are you? Because at times people ask you because they're curious, and at other times people ask because it might be of malicious terms. I'm going to turn it over to Auntie Dorothy, and then Gabriel, I see you next, and Joey, I see you next. Auntie Dorothy, if you'd like to unmute, please, or if someone can unmute her. Can someone please unmute her? Thank you, Auntie.
Anyway, when I work at different groups, the mestizos, here in the Northwest, starting in the 70s, we started to hear the term Indopino. The young people who had Filipino fathers and Native American or First Nation mothers wanted to honor both sides. So they came up with the term Indopino. And lately, within the FANHS group, we also have Mexipino, and you can have all the varieties, so it's always the Filipino is mentioned there, but they're honoring both. So that's a throwaway piece of information so people out there may be that.
Thank you, Auntie. I appreciate you chiming in with that. I'll turn it over to Gabriel and then Joey and then Lou.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and introduce myself.
Yes, please.
I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Gabe, or Gabriel. I go by he, his pronouns, and I'm the NaFFAA NorCal president, but I'm also on the FANHS Youth Advisory Council. And so I think one thing I'm hearing everyone, I really liked what Alan and Joe said about what the term Filipino or Filipino means, where it comes from 1535. And for me, I'm really lucky I was in FANHS, because if it wasn't for Dr. Theo Gonzalez out in the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, I wouldn't have learned that Filipino was a caste term given to Filipinos out in the Philippines. And I think where that gets mixed up is when we look at, for example, this year's theme From Quotas to Communities post-1965 is census designation. And so in census policy, we used to not be called anything. We used to just be lumped into the Asiatic category, all because that it was so much easier to other than to really was to expand and make everyone feel included within the US. And so post 1965 and giving Philippine people citizenship, it really allowed for that Asian American identity to come up. And I'm a grad student over at UC Berkeley, and that means a lot to me because it was here where I learned that the term Asian American and Filipino American really came to be with the Third World Liberation Front. And by adding the American, not through a hyphen, but as its own separate thing, creates a sort of third culture identity I think many of us, including myself, struggle with, that we're not necessarily Filipino, nor are we necessarily American, but we are Filipino American and a unique hybrid culture in order to express ourselves. And so in the sense of recognizing the etymology of Filipino, it's reclaiming that caste term to be the resilient and resistant people that we are and create that own culture so that we can find our own space in a place that doesn't give us that space.
I love the perspective, Gabriel. Thank you so much for sharing those words. I'll turn it over to Joey, please.
Okay, I'm Joe Tobacco. I'm from Metro New York chapter. My parents came here in the 40s. I was born in the late 40s. To be truthful, I'm an American. In this group, I identify myself as a Pinoy Yorker because as I travel around, I traveled all over the place. Okay, even after joining FANHS in 2004, I don't fit in to every single Filipino American group where I go, whether it's the West Coast or Hawaii or Alaska or any other place that I go to. It's different. And even here in New York, there's a big difference between me, where I grew up here on Long Island, compared to the Filipinos that live in Queens, where I originally was from, let alone Manhattan. They have a different flavor kind of than what I have here. So I'm still trying to figure out who I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for sharing that. And I think for many of us, it's still an evolving identity. So thank you for sharing that. I want to turn it over to Lou, and I'm glad Jeff's also going to chime in as well. And just time checking myself, we have about 3 more minutes for this very rich discussion. Lou?
Hi, everyone. Lou here. Definitely going to echo Alan's response earlier, is that it really depends on who's asking. There was this running joke a long time ago that oh, pag tanungin mo yung Ilocano kung Filipino sila, they say they're Ilocano, not Filipino, and then we laugh about it. But now I get it, because how can we really claim like an identity that was identified for us by our king colonizer, King Philip? And that's why we all have this name, right? And so to me, it's like if it's within the Filipino community, then I kind of like take the conversation deeper to address myself, whether I'm Filipino or Filipino American or just straight up Cebuano. But if it's like the media or social media or people outside of our community, then I start with either Filipino if I'm addressing myself personally as a cisgen male. But then if I'm addressing myself and my community, then it's important for me to identify I'm Filipinx American, because shifting away from the binary.
Thank you. I appreciate that comment, Lou. And thank you for holding space and showing visibility for our LGBTQI, Bakla, Babaylan communities too. Thank you.
That's my other pronoun is Bucks. Thank you.
I'll turn it over to Jeff Acosta. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, since I married into this community, for transparency's sake, Vicky Manugo Greco is my sister-in-law. I knew this when I married my wife in 1982. This issue would be raised. And as a result, when my sons grew up, I taught them to say, look, if anybody asks you what you are, you're an American. If they push, you say, okay, I'm an American of Filipino, Puerto Rican, Spanish, and British ancestry. Who in my pedigree do you want to talk to? So in addition, talking to my sons who were born in the 1980s, they graduated from high school in the early 2000s. They often told me the people that gave them the hardest time were the full-blooded Filipinos. Tallwood High School in Virginia Beach has a very large Philippine American student body, but that's who they got the hardest problem from, was the full-bloods. And it kind of reminded me of Hogwarts. You had the full-blooded wizards and then the part. And I'm very concerned about two things. First, a lot more has to be done. And I haven't heard a lot about the mestizo and why they have to pick Philippine over the rest of their ancestry. And the second thing is, we really need to get the more non-Filipino parents who have married into the community at our functions. I think that would help. And that's all I have to say.
All right, Jeff. Well, thank you. We appreciate that. And we just want to honor all our allies within the Filipinx Filipino community. Thank you, Jeff. All right, folks. So as we wrap up our last 30 seconds, this has been a very rich conversation, which we can continue on chat and as we see each other again soon. Some things to reflect on as we transition to our break in our second half. Please reflect on what terms feels most authentic to you. How do you want to be identified? And as you see Filipino Americans in our spaces, how do you hold space for them and let them know that they're seen and let them know that they're welcomed? Another thought, as I'm hearing from different folks' feedback, is that be audaciously you. Take up space. Take up an opportunity to identify however way you'd like. Share all your intersecting identities. And I want to thank everyone for sharing their terms. And let's continue having these conversations about how we identify and what these differences in terms reveal about our community struggles, our growth, and also our strength. So with that said, I want to thank our co-facilitators, Vicky, and everyone who chimed in. I'm going to turn it back over to Alan, who will usher us into a break in the second portion of our program for today.
Oh, there's a break? I didn't think there was a break because Delano over there is ready to go. He's been practicing moderating ever since I met him. What was that, 20 years ago? He was a natural moderator, natural leader. Am I your Ninong, man?
I don't know. You're my uncle.
Anyway, I'll let Delano take it over, and he's going to introduce his panel. But go ahead, Delano.
All right. Thank you so much, Uncle. So hello, everybody. My name is Delano. I use he, him pronouns. And before we get into my panel, I'm just going to do a little bit of introduction so you guys know who I am and where I'm coming from. So I am fourth generation on my dad's side, and I am second generation on my mom's side. My grandma actually called me up right before this and was like, oh, make sure you do this. And I was like, Grandma, I already got it all scripted out. Don't worry. So I like to even it out, and I like to say I'm third generation when I'm introducing myself to people. So yeah, I come from a lot of differing Filipino and Filipino American cultures, right? My mom came to America when she was, I think, 16. And my dad was born here and he's third generation. So he's very ingrained within American culture, while my mom had all of her Filipino culture coming into this. So finding that balance between where I was something that me and my sister really grew into, and we really had to figure that out together. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. And just as a preface before going into this panel again, right? This is a space for discussion. As Filipinos, Filipino Americans, and Americans, we all have unique stories that contribute to this web that we record as history. We will be diving into the complex weavings that make us who we are, our self-identity. And as we go into this discussion, our goal is not to divide and isolate, but to understand and empathize. Even with a majority ethnically homogenous society such as ours, we must still acknowledge and appreciate the diverse experiences that we do hold. With that, our opening question for our panelists is to please introduce yourselves, your name, your pronouns, and how you personally identify yourself. May that be Filipino, Filipina, Filipinx, Filam, Pinoy, Pinay, American, whatever you want. So could my panelists please unmute themselves and introduce?
Sure. Thanks, Delano. I can jump back in. Hi, everyone. I know I introduced myself earlier, but my name is Gabe Gabriel. I am on the FANHS Youth Advisory Council, but also here in my NaFFAA Northern California president hat. And so happy to be here with my fellow FANHS Youth Advisory Council members. I'm going to pop coordinate to Tianna.
Hey y'all, I'm Tianna. I use she, they pronouns. I am in San Francisco, but have been involved with Fawn Seattle for forever. um, and I would say I identify as Filipinx. And I think we'll go into discussion as to why a little bit later, so I'll save that and pass it to Vita.
I'm not prepared. Hi, I'm Vita Israel. I am from Seattle, Washington. I work at FANHS National, and I'm also on the Youth Advisory Council for FANHS with Tianna and Gabe. I feel like, I grew up as a fifth generation, but I'd say I feel more American than Filipino, but I usually tell people I'm Filipino American. But I am mestiza. I don't know who else is on this panel, but anybody else wanting to go can raise their hand and unmute their mic.
I can go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Hamora. I'm from FANHS Hampton Roads. I'm a queer Filipina, grassroots community organizer and activist. I'm based in Norfolk, Virginia. Currently, I've also been involved in the movement for social justice issues in the Philippines for, the past 18 years. And wouldn't be who I am today without being in FANHS, starting at the age of 12. I also organize with the Malaya movement, the Tango Migrante movement or Defend Migrants movement. And recently here in Hampton Roads, we've seen an increase of deportations of Filipino seafarers. And we just formed the Hampton Roads Coalition for Filipino Seafarers and identify as Filipino, whatever. I think that there's a lot of discussion around who's Filipino, who's not Filipino, but because we're so forced to migrate from our homeland, our experiences are, so vast. And so if you don't feel Filipino, we are Filipino regardless because we are, came from, the homeland. And I don't know who else is next. So feel free to intro yourself.
I can go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Gus Johnson. I'm from FANHS, Oregon, and the he, him pronouns. And I consider myself as American Filipino. And then whoever's next, I'm not sure who's left.
Is that everyone? I think it is. Okay, wonderful. Yes. So me personally, let me back up real quick. Yeah, I forgot to say this too, but I am also part of the FANHS Youth Advisory Council. And I've been working with FANHS National and FANHS Seattle since I was born, so 21 years now, almost 22. Yeah, so people who knew me back then, this is really dating you. But yeah, I'm really curious as to why our panelists identify this way. So something that I'm doing a lot of practice with is our stories. You know, as historians, we record stories and we tell stories, okay? And what stories we hold that contribute to our own identity is really important. So I'm wondering to our panelists, what stories or which stories do you hold contribute to why you use your preferred identity, such as Filipino, American, Pinoy, Pinay, whatever, right? And anybody could jump in or start, and not everyone has to answer as well.
Yeah, I can start us off. So, my entire life has been around public service, if you will. And so, my great grandfather was a Filipino soldier for America during World War II. And then on my maternal side, my Bisaya slash Cebuano side, my family were public defenders and also healthcare providers in the Philippines. And so, that kind of legacy has trickled down into me. As I was actually born in Germany. I was born in Ramstein, Germany, on a military base, and one of the reasons for that sort of idea of service was similar to the stewardship program for naval men and women. Was it was a pathway to citizenship, and it was a pathway to come to the U.S. and chase that American dream. And so, I'm really proud of that story, of that legacy, especially of my Cebuano side, where as I shared earlier, I really see the label and identity of being Filipino as being a term of resistance against colonial oppression and also having third parties identify who I am for me. I'm someone who really believes in choosing their own path and in order to choose your own destiny and craft it. And I guess that's sort of combined on why I'm here with NaFFAA, why I'm here with FANHS, is because in writing that history, knowing self is creating that future forwards as well. And so in really educating the community of that reclamation of the Filipino caste term is why I choose to tell and share with everyone my history and family's legacy of service, as it provides that avenue for them to see that being Filipino is a way to reclaim that service for yourself too.
Maybe we could have one or two more people answer this question. Oh, we have one more person who needs to introduce as well.
Hello there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, sorry, I've got to introduce myself. My name is Alexander Bungalon. I'm from OCIE over in California. Orange County in Inland Empire. Right now I live in Riverside. A little about myself. My family is also my mom was born in Hawaii, and then my dad was brought over as a first-gen immigrant to Stockton, California, or to West Covina area over in the LA area. I'm Visayan, Ilocano, and Tagalog, but honestly, I didn't even know what that was until I actually got to college. So I went to a private Catholic school. They didn't teach me anything about what it meant to be Filipino, and even being around other people of the Filipino groups, I wasn't really exposed to any of that. So all of the stuff I actually had to learn about what being Filipino was, what was being in the Philippines, or even identifying as like Filipino American is very confusing because it's like, yeah, I'm Filipino, but I don't know anything about what it means to be Filipino. I don't speak the language. I didn't even know there was Tagalog, Ilocano, or even Visayan until afterwards, until I got to know more people. And even now, like even post bachelor degree at biology from UCR, even then I still didn't get a lot of information, even from being part of the cultural groups. So that's what got me into more of the FANHS OCIEs, because I really wanted to get to know about more information. So even like, since I'm talking, I guess I might want to talk about being a Filipino American, is that actually, even now, like everyone else, I feel like yes, I'm Filipino, but also like, why do I have to introduce myself as Filipino American? to different groups, especially when other people in America, like for people who are white, they don't introduce themselves as European American, or even to like other different ethnic groups. So for me, I kind of identify as Filipino, because even saying I'm Pinoy is even harder, because I was like, when I introduce myself, I'm Pinoy, then you're gonna ask questions like, oh, like tell me about like you know, questions I can't answer because I didn't grow up that way, nor was I exposed to that growing up. So for me, I really define as that. But yeah, oh, also he, him, his. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. And I think Gabe wants to talk again.
I mean, I also recognize take space, make space, but Juanita, I wanted to touch upon that. I know you're curious about addressing the post-1965 working class, especially caregivers and domestic workers. And for those who are unfamiliar also, especially, I came through the NaFFAA pipeline of civic engagement. And because of that, I served all because of NaFFAA and the Biden-Harris administration, the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, where we really emphasized during our Filipino American History Months the policy that brought PhilAms to the US. And so for those who are new and hearing us toss around about the 1965 Immigration Act, prior to 1965, people from Asia were under the quota system of the Immigration Act of 1924, which was also emphasized by the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. And Filipinos, however, because we were colonized, were placed under that unique status of Philippine nationals, that we weren't US citizens, couldn't vote, but we also had the ability to go back and forth. Post 1965, post colonization, after tidings McDuffings gave us our own citizenship, it allowed that mass migration. However, a new status of visa statuses to be created. So we have the J1 visa, for example, and we hear of the H1B visa that is very popular within the current administration and around technical workers. J1 visas are usually where Filipino nurses and also with Filipino nurses and also teachers really fall into, because post World War II, there's a huge shortage of women that wanted to either go into the nursing profession or be educators. And so they really imported Filipino nurses, and you can read about this in the book Empire of Care by Dr. Catherine Choi over from UC Berkeley, where she highlights that history where the United States created that Filipino nursing program in order to bring labor here, however, still not give them citizenship. But still, when we're talking about undocumented immigration, for example, Philippine nurses would still try to find a way to stay in the United States because they loved it here so much, and the US dollar was so powerful. And so that created the other wave of migration that really brought a lot of PhilAms and even my own family members over here as well.
Yeah, I can go next. I think the question that Juanita raised in the chat is a very important question. If we look at Philippine history or Filipino migration in our history, depending on the decade, there really are the push-pull factors. You know, what labor field needed filling, you know, from migrants, you know, specifically in our context, Filipino migrants, that can be exploited, can be used for cheap labor, and, you know, start with the farm workers. We have the pensionados, all the way up until post-65 migration, which we're talking about now with the professionals. But, you know, after post-65, it really set the, you know, the presentation that Filipinos are highly skilled workers and only highly skilled workers. It leaves a lot of the conversation around, you know, working class or Filipinos of different classes. They're not always projected in the open and in our history. And that's something that really does need some focus on. My parents are post-1965 migration, you know, the nurse Navy narrative. That's how we migrated here from Florida to Maryland and then eventually settling in Virginia. But after that, you know, a lot of our community holds that perspective of, you know, I did the migration the right way, or everybody is a professional, and you have the like model minority sort of stereotype that, you know, persist in the psyche and like, you know, how we view our Filipino community. And as a community organizer, and working with a lot of domestic workers who are experiencing wage theft, teachers in the past who've experienced human trafficking, and currently, you know, supporting our kababayan that are currently in ICE detention, or Filipino cruise ship workers that are experiencing unjust like detainments and deportations off of cruise ships. It's now numbering over 160 across the United States of cruise ship workers. These are the stories that really needed to be told. You know, if it's even if it's not perfect, it's not, you know, the best of the best. It is part of our experience, and it's really rooted in the economic needs of countries like the United States that need to fill these labor gaps. And yeah, just adding that we have so many more stories to tell, to add to our rich history of our communities.
Wonderful. And Tianna, you wanted to say something?
Oh, yeah, thanks you both for setting that context. Yeah, it's always important. As fans, we know history can really help shape our understanding of our current world. And I guess to go back into the question of stories that shape the way I identify, I forgot to mention this earlier, but I'm also kind of like Delano, we're in between like third, fourth gen, and so I usually just say third generation Filipino, or Filipinx American. And just like a lot of other panelists, it just changes based on context. And so I know Filipinx, the term itself has had a lot of contention in recent years, and I just want to give y'all context to that too. And I guess this is the story. The Filipino American community, and I say Filipino American specifically because the term originated in the Filipino American spheres, specifically the online spheres, which is really interesting. But the Filipino American community, there's members, especially those who identified with the queer community, who didn't feel like the label applied to them necessarily because of the O and the A. And given that we live in the American context, OA is also very gendered, even in the Spanish context. And so the Filipinx came about as a way to combat that assumption that there is assumption and buying into that gender binary. And so the reason why I picked that up from when I first heard it was because I'm also queer, and it felt like something that didn't have to keep us lumped in into a singular story or a singular notion of what it means to be Filipino, Filipina. And it's also interesting just because I grew up as a Pinay, and now I have all these different experiences that culminate into what it means to be me, with it given my own identity. And I think it's just beautiful that we have so many terms that we can use to describe ourselves. And I hope that that continues to, with context, get developed. So that's what I just wanted to put in the conversation.
Thank you all. Yeah. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep on moving with some of these questions. And again, you all don't have to answer as well. And again, for those in the audience, if you do have some questions, please send them to the chat. Or if you would like me to read them as well, you can send them to me privately. Our next question is, from your own experience, have you ever felt, or do you currently feel, disconnected from your Filipino American identity or your chosen identity? And what are some of the things that you do to feel more connected to this identity?
Yeah, I guess I can
Yes.
start us off here as well. And also Ryan, when he and I were in DC, he's heard my giant rant about this as well. But there was a long time in my life where I'll just come out and say it. I hated being Filipino. Like I would look in the mirror and I was just ashamed of being Asian. I was ashamed of being Filipino. Whenever I play a video game, I'd search for the typical blue-eyed blonde white character because that's just what was seen as like Prince Charming in media. And it really hurt where after I'd log off from the video game, I would come back into reality and I would be eating my Filipino food. I'd hear Cebuano being spoken in my household. I'd see TFC, but those same video game characters I wanted to be were not on those TV screens. And that fundamentally created a cognitive dissonance in me, if you will, where it made me realize that just because I'm surrounded by Filipinos does not necessarily mean that I'm Filipino myself. And so I wanted to sort of be considered other. Wasn't until I got into high school, where I went to a predominantly white high school, it was a Jesuit high school in San Jose, and I was dancing maglalatik, and I just thought, it's your typical run-of-the-mill type of thing. I'm Filipino, it's just a day in the life. And my white colleague asked me what I was doing, and I was sharing about it. I was so excited because I thought, hey, I've grown around Filipinos all my life. San Jose must be super diverse, only to be hit with, damn, that looks hella gay, bro. And to have that gay being used as a slur, one, but number two, as an insult towards my culture, kind of fundamentally changed how I viewed myself, where it made me realize that I can never fit into this melting pot of American, but I have to embrace my role in the salad bowl, where we talk about the American cosmopolitan identity, but we can't just keep shifting ourselves and calling ourselves American when the Third World Liberation Front happened. And it wasn't until those ethnic studies classes that really made me start to feel more connected to my identity and empowering me of like, my diversity is my strength and my story is my strength. And it's so important to share that to combat those slurs and those insults of the discomfort that others feel against what I love and what I believe in. Vita, I think
Yeah.
you said you want to go next.
Yes, I'm wanting to go next. I was raised mestiza. My mom is actually adopted by a white family. I was raised half white, and I don't look half white. Me and my brother, all three of my brothers, we all look different. Ironically, I'm the most Filipino looking one out of the three of us, which is really weird because look at me. I think having the growing up Filipino and then growing up white is weird because I had a similar experience to Gabe where I had a similar experience to Gabe where I wanted to be white. I wanted to fit in with my cousins because I don't look like them, and I wanted so badly to fit in with my family and have that feeling of being connected with them because they didn't want to hang out with me. They didn't know what I was up to. They couldn't relate to me. Excuse me. I'm sorry, I'm lost right now, but I wanted so badly to experience that. And then moving to a predominantly white school as I got older for secondary, high school, middle school, that was difficult for me because what am I? Am I white or am I Filipino? Am I Korean? I've never felt Korean in my entire life. I look it, and I have Korean friends I was just hanging out with, but they don't want me. Every time I've ever tried to join a Korean club, they're like, get out, go to FASA. It's just not who I am, and I'm proud to say that I am a mestiza. I'm proud to say that I'm not Korean American, Filipino American, because that's who I am. That's how I was raised. And no matter how much I would like to change the way I look or wanted to change how I looked and fit in with my family and my cousins, it's not going to happen because this is how I was raised and this is the family that took care of me. So I guess I'm always going to be Filipino, and I'm, as much as I'd like to try, it's going to be very difficult to look white and appeal to that audience in my family. I can't read the chat right now, but I'm not sure who wants to go next, but anybody
I
want
think it's Julie.
Julie.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think similarly, especially as a kid, that's when I felt the most disconnected from my Filipino culture, my identity. I grew up in Virginia, and people have never been to Virginia Beach, the most southeastern part of Virginia by North Carolina, and I experienced so much racism growing up, whether it was from peers, talking about food, appearance, whether it was from police, like neighbors calling the police on my family, multiple times for music being too loud, like car parked out of the driveway, or being with friends driving down like country roads and towards North Carolina and being explicitly told that, you shouldn't drive down this way because there's a lot of bars and people don't like your kind around here. So all of that was very politicizing for me at a young age, but I didn't really find my voice until I actually joined FANHS and like learned more about my history and had a Filipino club in high school called the Filipino American Cultural Society. And, that gave kind of a framework of how to view my experiences. And, and then continuing on later in life as an activist in my adult years, learning about our long legacy of resistance. To be Filipino is to have this long legacy of resistance from kicking out Spanish colonization, also US colonization, Japan, and the long legacy of ethnic studies and, fighting for migrant rights and being in solidarity with struggles all around the world, especially, Black liberation struggles. I think that is what helps ground me, and what brings me even closer is, being part of the resistance, being a community organizer is the way that I find that connection with my culture.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on a little bit of, I guess, answering this question too. I'm a quarter Filipino. My grandmother on this call, Lourdes Markley, really taught me a lot about what it means to be a Filipino growing up, I think. I don't look very Filipino. I know that on my on my 3 trips to the Philippines. People are like, are you a little Filipino? And I have to answer, yes, it's my grandmother. So I have a kind of unique situation growing up where my cousins were all full Filipino and we grew up, we were very close together. They're my best friends now to this day. So kind of bringing that community I had through family, and identify very much as a Filipino today. And then bringing that kind of outside into the world from family to high school and now into college has been kind of a change of my identity, and finding this group of Filipinos that sometimes it's difficult to, I guess, get in and make community with. But I am happy to say that I was able to find a great community through my sport, wrestling, who we have 2 or 3 or 4 really good wrestlers on my team in college that are strong Filipinos. And we continue to cook together sometimes when we're not cutting weight. So a little bit more of a unique situation there, but I'm happy to be Filipino and to share this experience too.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you guys so much to all our speakers that just answered that question, and even to Alex, who kind of answered that question in his intro. But I see we have some questions over here, and I'm going to pass it off to Joey.
Thanks. With this conversation going the way it is, and identifying myself as a Pinoy Yorker in this group, my favorite movie is West Side Story. But I always related to being a jet until I joined FANHS and found out I was really a shark. Like Chino, Maria's boyfriend, Chino, was Filipino, a Filipino actor. So that's my insertion to all of this.
Thank you. And Arnell?
Yeah, I just want to comment on some of the differences, I think, because I'm a little older too, like Joey, and I also grew up in Virginia Beach, like Julie, and I didn't have the same experiences as what Julie encountered. I'm not sure, maybe it's because of where I grew up and how I grew up. During the time that we were in school, I still remember our social studies, the big thing that they were showing or trying to teach then was the mixing pot, of America. And I can also say that as I was growing up as a child, I didn't, I was born in Philadelphia, but my father taught me how to speak Tagalog, and I only spoke Tagalog till like I was 5. And then I started trying to have a hard time. I had a hard time learning English for a little bit, but then I adapted. Now, we were a military family. My mom was a nurse who came over on that program. They didn't get naturalized till the 70s, I believe, if I remember correctly. But the one thing I had that's different from what you guys are experiencing was that I felt that my father was very prejudiced. So I was kind of rebellious to that. I hated the way he treated other people. when we're in a crowd of other races, he'd start talking to me in Tagalog. He would not speak to me in English. That kind of thing is a little different for me. So I understand what you're getting at, but I still find myself thinking of myself as American and identifying with my Filipino roots. In terms of how I feel closer to my Filipino roots, I've been a big part of the community here in terms of even before I joined FANHS, I was starting to participate in a lot of the Filipino things. We started a young Filipino professionals organization here. I'm on the board with the Philippine Cultural Center, and I'm also an appointed commissioner with the Virginia Beach City Human Rights Commission. So I play very close attention to how things are in terms of the how people are treated. And I'll say one more thing before I left. I appreciate your time. During COVID, and I think I might have said this before, I experienced racism for the first time in my life during the COVID period, and I was told to go home. And I was born here, so it was a very surreal moment for me. And I know everyone has different experiences, but that's how I grew up here.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So I'm gonna go back to our panelists now. And I know Gabe was talking about the census, and like how we identify ourselves, and like our unique Filipino American culture that we do have, and the experiences that we hold. But I was wondering because like a lot of younger Filipino and Filipino Americans, they really feel conflicted between choosing on the census, like, oh, are you Hispanic? Are you Asian? Are you Pacific Islander? Right? Because for the Philippines, you can make an argument for all three of those like categories, but it's hard for them because like they weren't told and they're told to um, like really critically think about who they are. So for our panelists, what do you have, or like what is your take on like this choosing a category thing within the census or any survey that you take?
I'm really passionate about this. I'm just gonna dive in. I am just gonna say it out right that from working the previous administration, I really felt a attachment and an honesty that America was founded as a racist country, that you cannot escape racist classification or racial conversations in the American sphere because of how our country was founded. We had that 3/5 compromise that made Black people 3/5 of a person. We deliberately stated that only white men in good standing should also have the opportunity to dual trade. And then most importantly, we treated indigenous people and native people as others. And I think with benevolent assimilation and calling us little brown brothers and not being able to even lump us in within the Chinese categorization or Asiatic categorization, it creates the othering for us. And so we're very lucky as we're understanding from quotas to communities and the post 1965 Act that us Filipinos had a very unique opportunity and a unique nationalization as Filipino nationals. And to have an easier pathway to citizenship than other racial ethnic groups in the United States. But that doesn't discredit us from the overall movement of racial ethnic solidarity. That in order to have that better future and a multiracial solidarity and a better United States, we really need to use our history and combine it with the struggles of other racial ethnic groups, whether that be Black Americans, Latino Americans, Palestinian Americans, and really combine all of that solidarity to champion compassion and change and fight back against any oppression that comes, including the labels and categorization. Right now, SPD 15 from the Biden-Harris administration that would have done data disaggregation is gone. And so we need to keep advocating for data disaggregation so that our communities can be represented. And by having those fine data points, can we receive more money to our communities as well? Again, thank you. Sorry, I'm really passionate about data and representation. So
Thank you so much, Gabe. And I'll pass it off to Vita.
All right, coming from a young person's perspective, especially now that I'm applying to colleges, the way FAFSA, and I thought this was interesting, Common App and FAFSA now made Filipino its own category when you're applying and doing demographics. And I didn't know I could do that. So it goes Hispanic, white, and then Filipino. And I was like, okay. But my parents always made a point when I was younger, check whatever box you want, because it's okay to be multiracial. My grandmother is Mexican, white, and Chinese, and Filipino. And so having that multiracial background, and then having cousins who are also mixed race, a lot of them, my cousins are Black, and they just click Black. I don't just click Korean, and I don't just click Filipino. I always make a point, because demographics are important, and the data we put into the system benefits us as students. Putting in that I am more than one race is very helpful when I'm implementing that into the system in the college world, and in the city of Bellevue or city of Seattle world in which I work in. Having that data is very important, because it helps us say, okay, this is what resources we need to give students, and this is what we should be teaching in our curriculum. And so having that in our background, very helpful. And so that's my take on that. And that's how I feel, and how I should be identifying on my college applications, on my FAFSA, at work. You know, that's very important, because it knows what we need to give people who are like me and other multiracial students and workers.
Thank you, Vita. And before we get into some questions from the audience, I did see Tianna, you raised your hand. Would you like to speak real quick?
Yeah, I think Gabe actually summed up a lot of what I was gonna say. So shout out to Gabe for doing that, and that was very, very important. And don't ever apologize for what you're passionate about, and especially because of that, the things you were talking about were really important. I guess I'll just say that I feel like these groups, or just add, like, these groups are made to also, again, like what Gabe said, divide us. And honestly, I grew up pretty certain that I was Asian or Pacific Islander because of location, all these different talking points. But through study of ethnic studies, like, have seen that there's just so much more cultural influence. There's so much sharing that happens. We have like Austronesian languages and cultures. We have a lot in common with Pacific Islanders, and also like Chinese folks and things like that. And so I don't know, maybe our next generation will come up with some new terms or new ways to help identify our groups.
All right, I'll pass it off to Jeff then.
Yeah, Gabe, I hope to meet someday. I disagree with you on a lot, but then I'm a boomer. I'll accept that. And my family were the colonizers. Got to deal with that. But I also am a historian. And one thing I've learned studying history is you can't fix the past. There's nothing we can do to change that we can do to change the past. All your generation can do is focus on fixing the future. And by the way, I don't get insulted when your generation tears down the statues of the heroes of my generation, since that's been going on since recorded history. Grandchildren will always tear down the statues of their grandparents, and then they'll set up their own heroes and heroines. But I think we've got to have a more positive message in some ways, because remember, we have a lot of mestizo kids, and you got to understand, sometimes it hurts if all they hear is white is bad, white is colonizer. And you got to understand, not all of them fall into that category. European Americans, we're as diverse as any other community. We fight and argue amongst ourselves. Okay. And I agree, diversity is the strength of the United States. I really disagree with the current administration on this, and passionately. And I served 38 years in the armed forces. So what I want to have is a discussion. I agree with what we're trying to do, is have a discussion and then fix it. But in terms of identity, for those of us who are mixed, and most Americans are mixed, yeah, we should be able to proudly check the box for our ancestors. And then we got to live with the baggage our ancestors left us. And how do we deal with that? Well, there's nothing I can do to change the fact that a bunch of Spaniards showed up in the middle of the 16th century and started to colonize the Philippines. But I would urge you to go to the University of the Philippines, because there's a lot of new scholarship talking about the Spanish colonial period. And you need to remember too that the Spaniards weren't the only ones arriving in the Philippines before 1567. The Muslims had already worked their way north into Manila. So the Philippines, what I find fascinating, is has such a complex history. And what I hope we're going to say is, how can we look to the future? Because we definitely can't change the past. But where I agree with you, Gabriel, we must talk about the past, both the good and the bad. We can't sugarcoat it. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, it's definitely hard for a lot of us to like find that justice within our identity, and like especially with how we identify ourselves. So thank you. Joey, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, on this thing about identifying yourself on any of the census forms, okay? Identifying yourself as a Asian American Pacific Islander is worthless, okay? The only thing that's going to make it count for anything, and I personally, have experience with this with my daughter when she filled out her FAFSA form, is other than the fact that she's female, identifying the fact that she's Hispanic heritage. Hispanic is no longer a race, it's a heritage. You click that box, you're eligible for something, because under affirmative action, the only thing that counts is being female, Black, or Hispanic. All this Asian American Pacific Islander stuff, to me, is worthless.
Yeah, there's a lot of identity politics is a hard thing to swallow, and like a really complex topic to really delve into. So thank you for that. Ben, you had something to say?
Yes, I want to have a chance to listen to all of our young and talented leaders. I want to claim that I'm the surrogate uncle to Gabe, being that his grandfather and I worked very closely in building the Filipino community in San Jose. So Gabe, I still recognize and honor him. But I want to say this. I mentioned this in my presentation last week, and that is that a group of us, and I'm glad Dan Gonzalez, Professor Gonzalez is here, that in 1974, a group of us Filipino leaders pushed the state legislatures of California to change the category of us Filipinos from being other, non-white, Spanish surname, Negro, Native American, Oriental. I mean, there's probably two other categories that I might have missed, but can you imagine growing up, and this is even after 1965, of who, when Jeff is talking about, mestizo, all of us before 1974 were anything but Filipino. So I give credit to those leaders, my compatriots, who stood up and pushed to get Filipinos as Filipinos in the 11092 code. Remember that, in 1974. My point here is that as I heard Julie and Delano and all of you, it's interesting that we still need to be, as Jeff, be proactive in the evolution of our identity, in the institutionalization of who we are, not who someone wants to identify us. And that's why in 1974, when that law was passed, it was done so quietly, because we were afraid that if we made a big stink, that maybe those prejudiced legislatures would have stopped it from changing to Filipinos. And I think because of that, it was a trigger and a domino effect, as Gabe pointed out, where then other Asian Americans started saying, we want to be aggregated to our true identity, Chinese, Japanese. And last but not least, I want to say this. The reason why we push to have Filipinos as Filipinos, because every other group, as Joey pointed out, we're using our numbers to benefit theirs so that they can increase the services and the funding that they were getting from the government. And that was one of the main reasons we pushed for it. I know Professor Gonzalez was part of pushing for that because we were being denied to go into law school, medical schools, because the other Asian groups that were stronger, I'll just point it out, Chinese and Japanese, knew how to manipulate the numbers so that they can use our numbers to increase their affirmative action in getting into those schools. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to take it on chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Can Manang Dorothy ask Gus Johnson to talk for 7 minutes? Can we listen to him?
Yeah, go ahead.
Lola, I don't think there's time, but maybe next
Go,
time.
no, 7 minutes, go.
No, I don't think there's time on the panel.
Go, Gus.
No, thank you, Lola.
He
All right,
prepared your
Gus, you
speech.
could send us a speech or something, and we'll make sure to send it out to people as well.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I'll pass it off to Lou real quick.
Oh, I just have a question actually, like when we're talking about like intergenerational stuff and the experience of younger generations. I'm curious what, to those of you who were recently in high school, what the environment is like. Speaking from the millennials back in when I was in middle school, if you spoke English where you couldn't hear an accent, then you hung out with like the American crowd of Filipinos. But then if you spoke just Filipino, if your accent was broken, like if you're just Tagalog or Bisaya or what have you, then you hung out with just the first generation crowd. So what is it like at schools now for the younger generations when it comes to these two different communities of either Gen Alphas or Gen Zers? The first gen and the second gen, even the first and a half gen. Is it more unified now than it was before?
I think that's a great question, but it's not built for this panel.
Yeah.
And we are towards the end of our session here. Thank you, Delano. Thank you, panel number 2. Let's give you guys a hand.
Thank you, Uncle Alan.
Anyone can answer in the
Appreciate it.
chat, that'd be great.
We're going to be wrapping it up here, but before we close this, I'd like to pass it on to Romeo, our national director, to say a few words, and then we'll close with Ryan and Auntie Dorothy.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Alan. I just want to share few things before I turn it over to Ryan and Auntie Dorothy and back to Alan. First, I just want to echo what Lou was saying to thank our young adults, our young organizers and professionals for facilitating an incredible discussion, an incredible panel. It's a strange thing about the beauty of aging because you go from Ading to Kuya, and now I'm called Tito, and eventually I'll be called Grandpa eventually. But it's just so great to see the generations growing and really contributing to discourse and to dialogue in such a meaningful way. So I really want to thank our Youth Advisory Council for that. I want to give a shout out to Alan in Hampton Roads for really being so intentional about setting up this platform for this discussion, for not just the data, but the heart and the intentionality behind the Filipino American History Month. I want to recognize that Auntie Dorothy has been chipping away at this itinerary and agenda of the 4 sessions over and over and over again, making sure that all of us get equitable time to share. She has been so mindful in recognizing that there's so many beautiful stories here, and that we're not a monolithic group. So I want to thank Auntie Dorothy for carving that space for us to share our stories. Now, these conversations continue. On the thread for chat, I invite you all to come see Auntie Dorothy on October 30th. We are doing a Salamat Po party. I need to put that honorific. A Salamat Po party for Auntie Dorothy. She doesn't want any attention drawn to her, but we want to recognize her ongoing contribution, of course, to FANHS. And I am just really grateful for her tutelage as I take on this role to support on the national capacity. So please RSVP, join us in person here in Seattle, like Mr. Alan Bergano here, or join us on hybrid Zoom if you can. I want to close with these things that Auntie Dorothy reminds me pretty much every day. You need to spark that curiosity to really be fascinated with other people's story. When you build on that curiosity, you realize too that sometimes for all of us, We have a chip on our shoulder because we realize that injustices have been happening historically and also in contemporary times. So you have that curiosity and you have that chip on your shoulder. Auntie Dorothy would then conclude, then you have to have the courage. You really have to have the courage to speak on it, document, and do something about it. And so Auntie Dorothy really encouraged us to be scholar activists, scholar practitioners, and really be around the community and change the trajectory of our stories. It's really important to celebrate that and to honor Auntie Dorothy's mission on that. I want to be able to continue hearing your stories. I want to thank the folks who invited me for the West Coast chapter tours. I know I'm visiting Hampton Roads soon, Edwina, and the other chapters on the East Coast. I want to continue hearing your stories at the membership meetings with Terry. So please join monthly when you get an opportunity. Please join the conference when you have an opportunity. Join the conference next July as well in DC. And I encourage our conversations to continue. With that said, thank you, everyone. I'm going to turn it back over to Alan and Auntie Dorothy and to Ryan.
Okay, good. Thank you, Romeo. Okay, Ryan, you go first.
Yes, thank you. It's very important that Auntie Dorothy should have the last word here. I really wanted to say again, thank you so much, and the utmost respect to FANHS for this partnership. FANHS, under the leadership of Auntie Dorothy and others like her in FANHS, in the FANHS family, has accomplished so much, including the official recognition of this month in October, a special time to celebrate Filipinos in the United States. I've not had the pleasure of meeting Auntie Dorothy yet. I plan to, but I wouldn't be half as proud of being a Filipino in the United States if not for all the work that she and others like her have done to make me so proud to be Filipino. I wanted to close my part by telling a story. This is a story that I tell all the time about Philippine Independence Day celebrations here in Washington, D.C. from the 1980s to the 2000s. For those of you who have been around here, you'll remember this stuff. I came here in 1986 and I walked in at the height of what I think was Filipino engagement. It was right after the first People Power Revolution to overthrow an authoritarian government in the Philippines. There was so much hope, so much idealism. The Independence Day celebrations here in DC were the biggest, grandest celebrations I have ever seen, even to this day. For those who don't know, there was an amazing Filipino phenomenon happening here in Washington, D.C., in the Washington, D.C. areas. That's Maryland and Virginia as well. There were Filipinos and Filipino vendors from all over the country locking up the distance between the White House to Capitol Hill. So that's all the blocks on Pennsylvania Avenue, which is about 8 to 9 city blocks. D.C. during that time, during those days, smelled like the Philippines. It sounded like the Philippines. It looked like the Philippines for at least one day every year for a couple of those decades. And then one day the relationships between individuals, Filipino leaders here in the area, and organizations started to break down. Groups splintered off their celebrations. And so the one big celebration that we had became smaller celebrations in Maryland and Virginia and some parts of DC. We haven't had a large celebration here in DC in over 20 years because of that splintering off. I think a lot of us lost a lot because of this. The pride transmitted to me by those celebrations when I was a kid is no longer there, not at the same magnitude. The authenticity of Filipino food, Filipino dress, the languages, the stories we shared with one another in that huge space, and you can say the huge stage, it's all gone. I think this experience is a cautionary tale, what happened to us here in DC. I like that Alan started us off today with a moment of silence for those who are no longer with us. I love that Auntie Dorothy talked about how her Filipino-ness was often questioned and it took her a long time to find her footing and assert that she is indeed Filipino. I love that we're all here, FANHS, NaFFAA, and all the other dozens of organizations represented here. I think because when we do that, we have these kinds of conversations, we keep our story going. And I think that's something that we not just owe to those Filipinos who came before us, but to the children who will be looking for their identity very soon. So again, thank you all so much for the partnership. Thank you all for being here to listen to the stories, and thank you all for telling your stories. I really appreciate it. I'd like to hand this off now to Auntie Dorothy. Auntie Dorothy?
Oh, well, but before we go to Auntie Dorothy, we got good news for you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Our National FANHS Conference is going to be in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
July. So we look forward to seeing you there and NaFFAA. We could bring that enthusiasm spirit back.
I will be here and I'm looking forward to it. Thanks,
Okay.
Alan.
All right, Auntie Dorothy?
Yeah, I want to thank NaFFAA for joining us. I think it was a good marriage this time. I thank Mariella for following up on, I was always emailing her, where are they? Where are they? And she got them together. One day I would like to share of a Fred Cordova and Alex Escamado story, because the two old journalists knew each other long time ago. And so they were friends in the very beginning of NaFFAA and the beginning of FANHS. And yet they chose to go two different ways, not because they were part, but because they had different visions. Okay. So anyway, thank you, Ellen. I know this was 4 days. I thank all the people who had so much more to say, and we told them they can only have so many minutes or seconds. I apologize to all the people who we may have overlooked, and we won't overlook you again. If people are interested in sharing stories and future things like this, get in touch with our office or contact your chapter and pass the information on. This was done because with the pandemic, how do we reach people? I didn't do Zoom before. Now I understand we can reach people all over the country who are sitting in their homes and share stories and actually teach American history. And you notice I said American history because we are part of America. So thank you.
Thank you, Auntie Dorothy. Thank you, everybody. And like I said, our national conference will be in Washington, D.C., I believe the last week in July. You can contact FANHS National and hope to see everybody there. But I'd like to end this 4-day session with a saying that was taught to me by my dad. And that is, once a Pinoy, always a Pinoy. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna stop the recording here. Then we could just hang out and chat.